Good afternoon. Well, yesterday was an interesting day and one that I enjoyed thoroughly. Seeing Msholozi free after that very unjust sentence that the Constitutional Court passed on him, 15 months of imprisonment, a part of that under parole, and now he's able to speak. And beyond that, he was able to strike back. He was able to take action against Billy Downer and Karyn Maughan for the incriminating actions that they themselves committed, for having taken privileged medical information. Billy Downer leaked that information. And Karyn Maughan, that hack journalist who works also for the Daily Maverick, which is that foreign paid propaganda rag, published that privileged information. So Msholozi had struck back. It was good to see Karyn Maughan and Billy Downer there in the dock. And I must admit, I had some fun going with Mzwanele, taking pictures of those two sitting in the dock in the same way that they have been terrorizing and taking pictures of Msholozi for 22 years when he had been arraigned on trumped-up charges in the dock, both there in the Durban High Court and now in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. I've received some messages from journalists complaining that I had done what I'd done, going up to the dock and taking pictures, especially of Karyn. They say Karyn was just doing her job as a journalist. My response is poppycock. I've watched these journalists, including Karyn Maughan, terrorizing Msholozi, writing the biggest load of nonsense, not journalism, but propaganda. And yesterday, Msholozi was able to strike back. Now, why can't we show what they've done to him and to so many others of us over decades? Why can't we expose them for what they are? So I'm sorry, I'm not apologetic about taking pictures of the accused who are there on serious criminal charges in the dock in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. I enjoy doing it. I'm happy to expose them. I'm happy to make the point of the manner in which they have conducted them in an entirely unacceptable manner. And then, of course, there was the lovely crowd outside the Pietermaritzburg High Court, the elation of, after so many months, Msholozi being able to be back there up on the stage, speaking, addressing his people, singing Mshinewam, and to see the excitement, to see that connection between this people's president and his people. And what a huge contrast between how Msholozi relates to his people and that cold fish, Cyril Ramaphosa. I see there was some intended Twitter controversy and blowing up froth about me having stood up and given the seat next to Msholozi to the chairperson of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, Comrade Zuma. Well, Comrade Zuma came, he wanted to sit next to Msholozi. I had no problem with that. I'm not defined as a person in the struggle, as a liberation fighter. I'm not defined by the seat that I sit on. That is an issue that other younger people can worry themselves about. My history speaks for itself. So I was very happy to stand up, give Comrade Zuma the seat, let him enjoy his time, his place in the sun. I was very happy that he was there, that he showed the courage to come to the Pietermaritzburg High Court to support Msholozi. For him and the Provincial Executive Committee, the newly elected Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, to stay true to the promise that they've made, that they will support Msholozi. And during court cases, they will come to the court and support him. That is in stark contrast to what happened under Sihle Zikalala during the last part of the time when he was premier and under his administration in the African National Congress. And it was also in stark contrast to the conduct of Mdumiseni Ntuli, the former Secretary General of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. So we can draw our own conclusions. We can draw our conclusions about the correct behavior of the PC of KZN yesterday, about the correct presence of Comrade Zuma, and we can acknowledge Comrade Zuma for having taken the correct stance. I was happy to see him sitting in that chair. I know who I am. I know the struggle that I'd fought. I'd known the 22 and more years of going to every single court case that Msholozi appeared in. I have fought the arraigned charges, those farcical, trumped-up charges against Msholozi right from the beginning. My record is clear. I do not need to try and buy anyone's face. My dear comrades, I stand by what I believe in. I do not put a guard in front of my mouth in terms of criticizing those that I believe are selling out the liberation struggle. I've spoken out clearly. I've said unequivocally that Cyril Ramaphosa must go, that he had failed the African National Congress, and he had failed the people of South Africa. In a recent Twitter space, in my crosshairs, I stated very clearly that I believe we are now in a mafia state. And the head of that mafia state is Cyril Ramaphosa, the Pala Pala farm gate scandal man. That the coordination and the link between Ramaphosa as the head of the executive and Raymond Zondo as the Chief Justice and head of the judiciary, in terms of manipulating and creating this mafia state that we live under, is absolutely and totally scandalous. So I am not going to mince my words. The Twitter space, which I host together with co-host Tsepu Khadima, on that space we do not mince our words. We speak loud and clear. There was some criticism at the last Twitter space against Thabo Mbeki, quite legitimate criticism. And I was amazed by the kind of reaction there suddenly was, as if Thabo Mbeki is some holy cow, someone not to be criticized. And yet it was under Thabo Mbeki's administration that the worst excesses were committed with regards to moving away from a radical economic transformation, introducing us to new liberal economic policies, to not using the 2/3 majority that had been given to the African National Congress by a trusting and loving voters who wanted to see fundamental change. Mbeki wasted that 2/3 majority. He did nothing with it. And today we are faced with the problem that we want to do the expropriation of land without compensation, and we can't. because we do not have a two-thirds majority. We have to try and cobble that majority together with other parties. Well, that would have been entirely unnecessary during the second term of Thabo Mbeki's administration. He had the majority, but he failed to use it. The question that arises in my mind is, why did he not use it? What kind of interests and power games came into play? What was the role of the Western powers to prevent Mbeki from using that two-thirds majority to bring true and fundamental economic transformation in our country? These are critical questions. These are questions that have to be asked about Mbeki and even about President Nelson Mandela. What happened during the Mandela administration? Why did we not move forward on fundamental economic transformation? How did it happen that Mandela unilaterally decided to announce at the World Economic Forum at Davos that it is no longer the ANC's economic policy program to nationalize the major industries? Why did this happen? What kind of influence was there from the Western economic powers and from white monopoly capitalism, also here in South Africa? The time had come for all of us to stop beating around the bush, to go around mealy-mouthing about our past and our history. The time had come to speak openly about the betrayals that there had been within the African National Congress, to openly ask the questions: how did it become that there were ANC leaders who hardly had 2 pennies to rub together, but within months after the ANC became the government of South Africa, and within months of that negotiated settlement through CODESA being adopted, they become multi-millionaires and eventually billionaires? How did it become that Cyril Ramaphosa, who is certainly not a wizard businessman, suddenly became this so-called incredible businessman who became a billionaire? I believe that investigations are necessary in order to establish how money passed hands and what the consequences were of those monies passing hands. What was sold? What happened during the negotiations? What deals were struck? And how come that those deals then manifest itself and result in a small sliver of black elite becoming fabulously wealthy and playing the role of comprador capitalists? I've said so before, and I want to repeat it again in this live recording. We've reached a critical phase. We've reached a watershed moment in the history of the African National Congress and of our country. And that critical moment is that the branches of the ANC must now decide: are we going to allow the African National Congress to continue along this road of selling out? Are we going to allow a small elite of comprador African black capitalists who clearly have sold their souls to white monopoly capitalism to continue to destroy the rich history of the African National Congress? A history of growing radicalism and pro-poor policy positions as it developed over decades. What was expressed in the African claims of 1948, what was expressed in those 10 clauses of the Freedom Charter that was adopted in 1956 at Kliptown. All the documents of the ANC, those policy documents, those strategy and tactics documents that speaks about the need for radical transformation of our economy, the implementation of a second phase of the national democratic revolution, that clearly, without any equivocation, identifies white monopoly capitalism as the main enemy of the people of South Africa and the main stumbling block in full economic liberation. Are we going to allow these people who have thrown that whole rich history into the wind to continue to be in control of the ANC? If we do that, if we allow them to continue to be in control of the ANC, the African National Congress will lose its liberation impetus, and ultimately it will be destroyed. I see no ways that the ANC, if we fail in this upcoming 55th National Conference in December of this year, to replace the current leadership, especially Cyril Ramaphosa and all of those whom he brought in, with the help of billions of rands, of bribes, of manipulation of the election process through the corrosive use of money. If we allow that to happen, the ANC will be lost. The ANC will no longer be a pro-poor organization. That long history of struggle to radicalize the African National Congress, to make it a liberation movement sensitive to the needs of the poor and the working class, the majority of Black and especially African people, will be failing. The ANC will become an elitist party. It will continue to be a party that looks more and more like the Democratic Alliance. And after 2024 and those elections, it will end up being no longer the overall majority party, but one of the minority parties that will have only a chance to govern in coalition. And those coalitions will be volatile and weak. They will not be able to implement radical economic transformation. It is my belief that this is exactly what the white monopoly capitalists want. It is also my belief, and I'm pretty sure that I will not be proved wrong, that this is what Cyril Ramaphosa wants. In fact, that he is the agent of those white monopoly capitalist interests who want to create this situation. It will be a disaster for our country. It will be a total disaster for the Black and African poor. And it will be destroying the hopes and the dreams of future generations. So, my dear comrades in the African National Congress, you who are the rank and file members, the grassroots of the ANC, in the branches of the ANC that continue to sit in branch general meetings, I plead with you, as I've done so many times before, I plead with you, take the right decisions. When you nominate those who you want to be candidates for the national executive and for the top 6 of the ANC, nominate comrades who are committed to return the ANC to its historical roots, to return the ANC to the position of being a radical party, a radical transformation, pro-transformation liberation movement, a radical liberation movement that wants to see the majority of Black and African people being in control of this economy, and the economy structured in a manner that it will serve especially the poor and the working class. Those ideals we can never betray, but we can also not implement them if we do not elect the right leadership, And that correct leadership are not going to be people who have betrayed us in the past. I do not believe in a leadership who have told us beautiful stories, who mouthed the most amazing fairy tales about liberation. But when it came to the implementation of policy, they were cowards. They failed to implement the radical economic transformation resolutions of the 54th National Conference of the ANC. Then suddenly, they became meek and mild. Then suddenly they were too concerned. In fact, they became the policemen and women of white monopoly capitalism, too concerned about the interests, about the reaction of white monopoly capitalism. So no, those who've betrayed us are not suddenly going to change. A leopard doesn't simply change his or her spots. Once they've betrayed us, let us rest assured they will betray us again. And the definition of a fool is to hit your head against the wall once and to come back to hit your head against that very same wall again. No, we need a different leadership. We need comrades in the ANC who've proved themselves to be prepared to stick out their necks, to face the consequences of their commitment for true transformation, who have faced the preparedness of this sold-out leadership of the National Executive Committee of the ANC and the instruments of political repression that they have and that they have manipulated to now be in their hands truly as weapons of factional destruction, such as the National Disciplinary Committee. To face them, to face the consequences of losing jobs, to be charged, to be suspended from your membership of the African National Congress, to be threatened with all kinds of things, even possible death. Those leaders who have stood up, who stiffened their backs, who have stood the test of the time, who continued to speak out, who continued to articulate the policy of radical economic transformation, who did not allow themselves to be described as a so-called separate grouping or faction within the ANC, but continued to insist that radical economic transformation is the official economic policy program of the ANC, and that every member of the ANC has a duty, a constitutional duty, and a duty bestowed on them by the resolutions of the highest decision-making structure, organ of the African National Congress, its conferences, a duty to implement those policies that had been taken by that highest decision-making structure. Those are the comrades that you should nominate. Those are the comrades that will not betray you and will create the opportunity for the ANC to regain its revolutionary heart. So I conclude, my dear comrades, with inviting you to continue to also come to my Twitter spaces. As you know, it is called In My Crosshairs. On Wednesday night, that is tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, I'll be talking to Afrikaner businessman Louis Liebenberg. Louis had been under attack because he had the courage to come out openly and say that he believes that President Jacob Zuma is being treated appallingly. to say that he believes that Cyril Ramaphosa is bad for this country. Not just bad for Black and African people, but for everyone, including also the white Afrikaner community that Louis has a very strong association, who had spoken out, who was prepared to put his money where his mouth is. So come and listen tomorrow night to Louis Liebenberg speaking his mind in a way that he's very capable of doing. I got to know Louis over the last couple of weeks as an outspoken, sincere, honest, and very courageous man. And finally, my dear comrades, I call on you to continue to support President Jacob Zuma. President Zuma has shown that he can withstand the attacks that are thrown at him. Yesterday, he showed his mettle by taking on those agents of white monopoly capitalism, both within our legal system, within the National Prosecuting Authority. I'm talking about Billy Downer. And also within the media, those hacks who are in the service of their paymasters of white monopoly capitalism. I'm talking about Karyn Maughan. But President Zuma is still under severe attack. Coming Monday, he is again appearing in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. This time, as he had done and had to do so many times during the last 22 years, as an accused in that farcical arms deal trial. Let us continue to support the people's president. Let us continue to stand up against injustice, against abuse, against the abuse of our legal system for factional party political purposes. I will certainly once again be there next Monday at the Pietermaritzburg High Court, as I've said so many times, as I had been for the last 22 years. I'm there, first and foremost, as an outrage and an expression of my outrage against abuse, political persecution, and selective justice. Because I continue to believe, and I will state that ad nauseum and unequivocally, selective justice is no justice at all. So yes, I'm a soldier. I have been a member of Umkhonto weSizwe. One of my commanders was Comrade Jacob Zuma. And I repeat the phrase that I've used so many times when talking about these experiences. One soldier does not leave another soldier behind on the battlefield. And truly, we are in a battle for the heart of the ANC, a battle for the future of our country, for the future of true liberation, and an acknowledgement of the sacrifices that so many comrades have made for that liberation. Let us never allow those sacrifices to go to waste. And with those words, I conclude this live stream broadcast. And I conclude, of course, as I always do, with a slogan that has been that guiding light and torch, lightening the dark road ahead up the mountain of that long walk to freedom. A luta continua.